It's Tiffany Lorraine Galloway, certified high performance coach from my new space. Look a little more familiar from the beginning. Full circle. Here we go. And we're going to be talking about just that, being a resilient overcomer. That is the theme for this month. And boy, have I felt it. Be careful what you call yourself, because you'll be tested to see if you're really true to it. So with that, I have Jocelyn Bates with me today, and she's going to talk about her own journey of overcoming things resiliently. Jocelyn, thank you for being here with me. Please tell us a little more about you.
Well, I am a cultivator of curiosity and creativity in the human experiment, but I didn't start that way. I started in the arts in different places. And part of my story of resilience comes from grief and dealing with a lot of death. And I've actually always dealt with death. I've had I wouldn't say always. From the time I was like a teenager, the first death that happened was somebody who committed suicide, a friend of mine in ninth grade. And that was the first time I experienced it. But I couldn't even count on all my digits, hands and feet, how many people I've lost. And so that is something that's been around in my life. And then in September 2021, and I'm an only child, and I was living with my parents and with my 3 kids and my husband. And my parents died 7 days apart. And it was totally unexpected. They just went over their 51st anniversary. And as an only child and living in the house with them, so close with them, second parents to my kids, my whole life fell apart. And I don't know if you're an only child or not. As an only child, yeah, you do define yourself a lot by your parents. At least I'm not going to say that for everyone, but I defined myself a lot by my parents. So when they were not there, everything fell through, and I went into like complete PTSD, complete shock. It was during all of the COVID protocols, which made it that much harder.
Oof.
And not being able to, there's so many things that were taken away from me, and everything that I held close and dear. I'm a very holistic person. I really care about medical freedom and freedom in general. I unschool my kids, all the way out there. And so it was like, wow, it was a real slap in the face to me, and on so many levels. Like I had no idea how vulnerable I actually was in all of it. And so everything fell out from under me. I was in shock and PTSD, and I have months I don't remember anything.
Oh, wow.
And at the same time, we were still living in the house where my parents lived, and my kids are all going through grief. At the time, they were ages 3 to 4 to, I guess, 10, 11, 12, in that area at that point. And it was just so much. And it just, nothing seemed quite real.
Yeah. I could relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had to crawl out slowly. And the life that I was leading, and of course everyone had I feel like everyone had to be resilient to overcome COVID, like let alone if you lost people. But it still requires for me a resiliency, even to this day, just getting through, back into normal life with the kids and being, for us, it's because, my parents are no longer here. And that was such a amazing relationship for my kids and me. So I was in PTSD, and it took me, I'd say 4 months to even look at it. And when I started to crawl out, I started to open up to my spirituality. And I've always been very spiritual. I've been very spiritual. I used to read tarot. Like I set myself through college reading tarot cards in bars for people. Like I had my first cauldron at like 13. I was spiritual, but I ended up I was an Expressive Arts Therapist, intermodal, for many years. And I ended up in the nonprofit world and working as a therapist in domestic violence shelters, in the jails, with the homeless, with brain injury. And when I was doing all that, what happens is you as big and beautiful as you see the arts and healing, it also kind of strips away a bit of spirituality when you're constantly working with just really hard situations. Like one of the jobs that I worked really closely with was sexual assault in teenage girls. And so every girl I saw had a massive sexual assault situation. And so it strips away a bit of your spirituality. It's like, okay, you start to not pay attention to it in the same way because it's hard to look at it. And
Mhm.
I'm sure that's not for everyone. For me, it was hard to look at for me. So I kind of, after a while, I left Expressive Art Therapy and just was in creativity. Like I was just teaching creativity, homeschooling, running co-ops, like doing this. But when my parents died and I went back into my life after those 4 months, I had a calling back to my spirituality.
Mhm.
And it was through that grief that I began to jump headfirst again into human design. I became trained as an Akashic Records guide. I had a moment of panic attacks. Like this is like I had panic attack because my parents died just from a sniffle that started in the house and it happened very fast. That year after my parents died, when I was fully aware, and my kids got a sniffle, that was like 2022. So kids were going back to school, right? And I was like, I couldn't sleep. I watched my kids
Mm.
praying, please don't die. Like it was really out there was going on in my mind, but it was causing insomnia. And I was literally starting to go crazy. That's when I found Yoga Nidra, and Yoga Nidra was something that saved my life. And I called the teacher that I was started listening to, and I'm like, I just have to tell you my story. Like you have to know how deep in it I was. And she's like, come train with me and be a teacher. So that's when I got certified as a Yoga Nidra teacher and a new Yoga Nidra guide. And then I jumped into soul art, which is very reminiscent of my expressive art therapy background, except where expressive art therapy kind of, I don't know, drained the spirituality out of me for a while. Soul art is like making
Fills you back up.
right? And I used all of those things that I got certified in, and I started moving really fast through. I used all of those things for my own journey, and each one of them deepened my healing, deepened my understanding of who I was, allowed me to start to identify who I am and what matters to me, because I had to really embrace that word orphan. Like, and
Mm.
I did it purposely. Like I didn't have to embrace that word. I'm 47, right? But I did, and I embraced it, and I kind of worked with it and played with it. And so all of the things, and so I've never been a person to ever offer any service that I haven't fully 100% like delved into it myself. Every one of those things was something that I used to understand, to get curious, to get creative, to move and express myself. And that's why when I said in the beginning, it's like I'm a cultivator of curiosity and creativity in the human experiment, because that's what I do. That's how I know how to live. And that's what saved me, was like like being curious about, okay, but so why do I feel this way? And what's behind this? And creating and moving it into like creative expressions. So that's kind of, I guess, would be my story of resiliency in a nutshell.
Well, those are a lot of things to overcome, and it makes sense that there's PTSD, especially with what you shared in the beginning. That
Yeah.
witnessing something like that at a young age leaves a mark. Anything traumatic when we're young leaves a mark and has to be dealt with at some point. And then to have the other things on top of it. I'm the oldest of six, and my parents are still kicking, so I have no relation to what that's going to be like when my parents
Yeah.
go. I will still have siblings around, most likely, and so I do miss my grandparents, however, that are all
Yeah.
gone. And my only regret with them is I didn't get to know them better and that I wasn't closer to them, especially on one side of the family more than the other, that we hung out with more. And but I was young and it was their time. One was cancer, one was Alzheimer's, another was cancer, and
Yeah.
it's just the way that it goes. But to have them suddenly go 7 days apart from each other is usually a special story, that they're so one with each other that they don't last very long without each other.
Oh, well, yeah, my mom died, and then my dad literally said to me, like, the world is yours now. Because he had a way to get out of the hospital. He had a release date and everything. He's just oxygen plummeted. He called me, told me that his oxygen plummeted. He just didn't want to be here anymore. They were totally like twin flames, and they had
Aw.
been with each other since he got out of the Vietnam War. And yeah, so it was, yeah, but it was hard to get over that too, because I'm the one who had to make the choice to put him on hospice too, because they wanted to
Mhm.
restrain him and do all this stuff. Like, I didn't get to see him at all in the hospital because I was kept away. When I did see my mom, it was super traumatic. Like, and I was kicked out before she died. I had shock upon PTSD
Yeah.
upon just like everything just piled on when I had that. So, and my kids all were dealing with it in their own way too, because they just know the ambulance came to get them because we put them in their rooms so they wouldn't see it. We didn't want them to see. I almost feel like I should have now let them see because they would have been able to say something. But yeah, so there was all kinds of like
Yeah.
levels and just it was a lot. And I'm just coming up on the 3-year anniversary now. I've noticed that like it's starting to affect me. This time of year is starting to affect me as September comes
Yeah.
closer. And still, like, the grief comes in waves, but I have tools to work with it. I know how to dive into it. I know how to release it. And I've learned for my own life and for a lot of people I talk to that when you have grief, right, it actually can be an amazing open door. It is like grief breaks your heart. It is the most lonely. You have 6 siblings, or you're the oldest of 6. When your parents die, you will feel lonely because you will feel like no one else understands this because you had a different set of parents than your sisters and brothers. Each of them had their own set of parents. And I
Yeah.
say that because you're treated differently. It's just different. There's nothing the same. It is the most lonely experience. And yet it is universal. It is
Yes.
universal. And it is 100%. No one's getting off this planet without experiencing grief, even the littlest ones. And so, so there's something of comfort in that. And there's something that gives me courage in that. And it makes me wonder, why is this the universal experience? Like, why is this the universal experience? And what is in it for us? And if you can kind of grab yourself and look at it and walk with it for a while, it's like a portal. It's a portal of transformation if you choose to use it that way. For me, I was like, my parents are gone. I better do something with this because otherwise it's going to drag me down and I'm going to sink,
Yeah.
So that was my choice. But yeah.
Well, and I think the last few years have really shown us, what are you made of? Let's find out. And it's
Yeah.
brought out the good, and the bad of people. I think it's really gotten the heart of the truth that, okay, who are you? Where are you at with yourself? And where do you want to go from here? And are you going to do the work? Because no one can run from the inner work anymore. You've got to do it. We're more connected, but also more isolated than ever. And it's now more of a war for our mind and our hearts. Can we stay true to what we love? Can we find our flow and be honest with ourselves and not force ourselves into a story that doesn't serve us and doesn't let us serve at the highest level that we could? In a lot of ways, I think we're all overcoming different things, but it all is for a reason. That's all for us to choose if we want to be our best, and also to realize anything is possible. I love that you brought up curiosity, because I think that's so important today in what we're facing. Children are curious. Children are this example of being just resilient and learning to walk and learning to talk. They don't give up. They keep going. And I love having my kids around me, and I love working with little kids because they're still full of wonder just about the world or the sky or a cloud or a flower or a bug, or they're curious. And I think we get so caught up as adults of, I went through this hard thing and oh my gosh, and then we don't want to hurt. We don't want to hurt. We can't run from it.
Well,
Yeah.
even in like yogic traditions and stuff, and even in therapy, I mean, I know so much about the tools because of being a therapist for so long, walking people through major traumas, going through my own traumas. But in any of these fields that work with people, right? It is a known fact that if you breathe through it, it goes faster. It moves faster. It's a known fact. If you
Yep.
find yourself present with it, like it will move faster. It will change and shift, and it will and that change it, like the way, even if the grief is still sad, the sadness shifts in different ways, in different forms. Like if and even in that shifting, it gives you a break just because it shifted. Not that it's easier, it's just because it shifted, right?
Yeah.
And so like when you breathe through anything. But I will say this about I love children. Children, like I love them all. I love children from like young to like teens. I just love them all. And one thing I will say is that's why I unschool my kids, because I feel like the public school system completely shuts down curiosity and creativity. Like, I feel like that's where we've all been conditioned to think differently, like, or not, we've all been conditioned to think not differently, to be, kind of, I don't know, like
Yeah.
taught how to expect certain things or see certain things.
Yeah, well, I have a unique point of view with that because I was homeschooled, private schooled, and public schooled. So I've seen the good, bad, and the
Oh,
ugly of all three. And the only thing I can say to that really is it depends on the child. And could we do better in our education system? I think absolutely so. There are
yeah,
some countries doing much better than we are right now, but there are a lot of options too. There are private schools, there are charter
there
schools,
is.
there are homeschool. I understand all of it. There's
Yeah.
curriculums if you want to homeschool. You don't just have your kids at home. There are curriculums out there. We did Benjamin Franklin Academy. My daughter's about to go to a charter school called Thomas Edison. So there's options out there, and parents have created this, or other teachers have created this. And so I hope parents realize there's just an option out there. But ultimately, it's what's best for your kid,
Well,
and how.
yeah, and some people homeschooling isn't available for them,
Yeah,
or however it works. We unschool, which means we don't even use a curriculum. We simply allow the kids to follow their joy.
right.
But
Mhm.
so, but for me, and the reason I say it is not necessarily to cut down public school, but to understand. I come at it from an artist, from a creative.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, when a child, and I understand developmental stages of children, and when a child is, like, say, in kindergarten, this is what I used to do with my kids. I used to take all of my paints as an artist, and I'd put them on the kitchen floor, and I'd make sure I could clean up afterwards, and I just set them free, and they would create whatever. It was amazing. I have so many awesome pictures, right? But what do they do in kindergarten? Think about it. They give you
Color in the lines.
3.
There's this color. Yeah.
Yes, and they give you 3 cotton balls, and they say, "Make a snowman," right? Like, and we are taught so young not to experiment and be curious and express. So even as you get older, high school, what's art? It's about portfolios, about learning techniques. Not you don't see it in schools. How do you express who you are? What's really interesting is teenagers. They did a great study. I feel like it was like in Finland or Norway. I forget where it was. They did a study about what developmental stage is, what's needed in the teen stage, and they found out that the teens don't need anything other than understanding who they are in community. Like, they need not an inch of math, not an inch of reading, not an inch of anything. What they need is to learn how they feel and how
Mm,
that affects others, and how
yeah.
to use that to help their community. And when they did this, and they took high school away from high schoolers, and then they gave them community college for the first year, they got 4 years of high school done in 1 year because they were ready. They knew who they were. So it's
Yeah.
interesting how all of it kind of plays out. So we totally got off topic there.
No, it's right. We want our children to overcome what's in front of them
Yeah.
in the world, but we also want them to be able to honor who they are. And education and how you're educated is a huge part of that. One of my children started in a Montessori school, and because I liked that if they were at a station they were interested in, they got to stay there longer. They got to
Yeah.
develop that more. And I pay attention to that with my own kids. If they show interest in something, I try to give them more opportunities with what they're showing interest in. It
Yeah.
validates that I care about what they care about. And it also just seems to fuel that ability to learn more faster. And I think there are some gifted teachers that may have the ability to kind of do that for some kids, but really as a parent, I feel like it's on me. I can't just give it
Yeah.
over. Like I've got to take some responsibility, whichever route that I go on. How am I cultivating my child to be resilient, and whatever gift is their gift, or whatever set of knowledge that they want and what direction they want to go. And so they need those options, and every family is different. And if this podcast is not about anything else, it is about, what does resilient motherhood look like to you?
Yeah.
What works for your family? What's helping your kids grow? We don't have a world that it's like one size fits all anymore. And there is no set path right now, which can be exciting or scary depending on what side you get to take with it. If you look at it as this is something to overcome, that's going to make this next generation really strong and creative about the opportunities that are in front of them, what they could create if they want to be an entrepreneur, if they want their own business, if they want to work for somebody, if not, if they're going to, there's so much. And it's exciting. It's just moving very, very fast.
Yeah. And it's like kids grow up so fast too. That doesn't change. That's been around forever.
Oh, yeah. Mhm,
No,
mhm,
it's interesting because after what happened with my parents, I had to take a year and a half off of just we didn't do anything for like a year
mm,
because what we were doing was living in this space and going, how do we inhabit it without
mm,
my parents? Like, they was
yeah,
so really, really deep. Like, and had they been in school, they would have been pushed
mhm,
to create these schedules and stuff, and I've been able to witness them. It's like watching baby birds just come out of their shell again slowly, and begin to, like, engage again, but they're doing it because they wanna do it, like,
yeah.
because they're ready, like, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Okay,
so
you're done
interesting.
grieving, back to the schedule, or you're done this, go back to work, or, yeah, yeah, grief has a schedule. Yeah, yeah, grief shows up the same way for everybody. No.
Right?
So, I think it's great that you were able to honor that. With everything we've been discussing, I keep bringing up resilience, but I'm really curious what your definition is of it with everything we've discussed.
I mean, if I think about the way I look at it of the idea of resilience is being able to look at where you came from, and
Mhm.
get curious and express it a different way if you don't want to go there again, or express it the same way if you want to go there again. Like, say you want, I don't know, where people come from all kinds of walks of life,
Yeah.
but that idea, the resilience is being able to look back
Mhm.
and be like, okay, this is where I went wrong. This is where I didn't feel great. This is where I felt good, and be like curious in how you can make that happen a different way. And for me, the answer is in creativity and expression. For someone else, it might be being curious and just making decisions or choices in different ways, or choosing to strengthen different things, right? But I mean, resilience is being like, I can now look back and I can see the strength I had, even though I felt the
Mhm.
weakest I've ever been, right?
Yeah.
I can look back and I can see, like, how strong I was and how I survived something that a lot of people wouldn't have been able to look at, wouldn't have been able to speak to, wouldn't be
Yep.
able to, not in a way that could help others, right? And
Yeah.
and in that whole process, I found myself, which is, like, so crazy, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like, "Oh, that's who I am."
Well, it's so interesting as you're talking about it. I'm thinking about how, there was a study that wanted to find out who are geniuses. Well, I found out every baby is born a genius. Every child is a genius. It's when they conform to systems and ways of thinking and don't express themselves that the genius is lost. And that seems like as adults, we want to come back to our genius. We want to come back to who we were meant to be. And I love that the world is moving more in a direction of who am I meant to be? How can
Yeah,
I do what I love every day and serve others with the gifts that I have? How can I be there for my family and show up in a way that serves them best, that really lets me be the full expression of myself so they can be the full expression of themselves? And so, with what you're saying, it's like any mom out there, there's really no right or wrong in
yeah,
what you're doing as you are becoming yourself, or maybe unbecoming all the things and expectations you were told you had to be. What feels right in your heart? What brings you peace? What lets you take that breath that we were talking about?
yeah,
And having someone to help sometimes is necessary. Grief alone is really difficult. Sometimes we need a grief coach or someone who's been there to hold our hand. And then what you talked about too with humanity, I think we're learning what we're really made of, and
yeah,
that as a humanity, we're not alone. All these Me Too movements and different things like that, realizing there's somebody out there in the world going through the same thing you are, but that also means they've overcome it, and that there's a choice, and that there's a path, and maybe there's a faster way to get there with some help. But that also means the same resources are there for our kids. So if we have a kid who's struggling with something, there's somebody out there. And if we can be more proactive in helping each other freely and letting that build, then we're really going to be a new level of humanity we've never been before. And I hope that's where the next generation is going for my kids.
yeah. Yeah, and, like, so one of the things coming up in, like, we have I don't know if you believe in astrology or anything, but we have so I do human design, and we have major shifts happening
Yeah.
coming in the next few years. But just saying that, that was human design was one of the things that helped me help myself and my kids through grief. Because once my parents died, I looked at all of my kids' charts to understand their sleep patterns, how they take things in, how they need to answer questions, and that was like a really big help as a mom to my kids to understand they're not going to grieve the same way as me,
Yes.
but I need to look at their charts because I need to understand, like, how do they grieve? Do they need time? Do they need me to come get them? So I actually took a lot of time with my chart and my kids' charts because it helped me to just like, okay, gave me a little bit of a system to
Yes,
start
a guideline. Yeah. And that's what we want to share here is those tips, tricks,
Yeah.
strategies, tools maybe you've never heard about before. I know I've explored a ton of them and I find everything very valuable. Some of them have worked for me, some have not. Some have worked for my kid better than it's worked for me. But at least I have those tools in my
Yeah.
toolbox that I can pull from. And then that makes being a resilient mother easier because I'm like, okay, well, what's in my toolbox? Okay, what happened in that podcast episode that I remember I was like, yeah, I got to implement that. So that's one thing I like is I'm learning along the way too with every interview that I do. And so for you, what's probably the most powerful lesson in your journey that helped you overcome the grief?
Well, I've definitely been able to. I went through an existential time, and I realized I was so afraid of death my whole life, to the point where I have every last voicemail my parents ever left me. I was so afraid of them dying my whole life that I still have every voicemail they left me from the time I've had this phone, like that, and that's got to be 12 years. And so, like, I think I went through a really existential time. Like, what are we here for? When I was like in shock at PTSD, I don't know what I was doing. I was drawing and I was writing because I was creative and I knew I needed to express it. So I was doing that, and I can look back and read the existentialism. I can read it. I can see how I dissociated from myself. Everything's in she, nothing's in I. I could see like all of
Mhm.
this stuff, right? Um, and I think what I learned is I don't have to fear death. And that is
Mm,
like the biggest thing I learned. The people say the worst thing can happen is you can die. Like, I'm not afraid of it anymore.
wow.
I'm not, which gives you a massive freedom to like go live your life. I
Yeah.
think part of that's been my work in the Akashic Records, working with ancestors and people, working with my parents from the other side, working with angels. All of that has added to my understanding. And yeah, if you can get to those original fears, um, I honestly don't think that sits for me anymore. I don't feel
Yeah.
it. I don't feel the connection, the response to it anymore. But I think I went my whole life without knowing I had it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anyone asked me, "Are you afraid of death?" Because I've always said, "I'm afraid of having no control and being, like, say, paralyzed or something like that," right? That would be
Mm,
freaky. But I think in the end, it really was, like, death and loss.
yep.
And so, for me, the biggest lesson has been realizing that I'm not afraid of death anymore.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that would have not maybe come up any other way.
I don't think
And
so.
so I think that's life sometimes. It'll have us hit rock bottom. And I have a friend who gave me a poster. I've referred to it before, but it says, I'm sorry, honey, rock bottom has a basement. Like,
Yeah, that's
you're
so
not
funny.
gonna get the lesson the first
I
time.
have to go lower.
It's gonna get you to where you're gonna learn the lesson. So it's better just to do the work and be proactive instead of wait for something to motivate you to do the work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and 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 there's really so many ways to do it. And some people are like, I don't have time, I don't have money to hire somebody, da da da. It can be 5 minutes a day, it can be 10 minutes a day, it can be journaling, it's breathing, it's simple things,
Yeah.
meditating. Maybe you like reading, maybe you like whatever you like. Everyone's different and unique. You get to explore that and be excited about that, but then you get to make the time. And even if life is stressful, even 5 minutes, 2 minutes is extremely powerful. Even 5 minutes one-on-one with each of your kids as a single parent has a lot of impact. They just need that 5 minutes of your undivided attention. And if you can give more, great. But 5 minutes, that's doable. So any of these things we're talking about are doable. And if you're not familiar with human design or some of the things that we've talked about today, I'm sure Jocelyn will be happy to
Yeah.
dive deeper in that. I know bits and pieces of some of the spiritual side of things. But I know more of the breath work and high performance coaching and daily habits and practices and strategies for high performance kind of things, but also a lot of overcoming narcissistic abuse. That's kind of more my wheelhouse because a lot of my grief comes up on days narcissists purposely caused me trauma. And some of
I've
them are
been there too.
holidays, some of them,
I've been there
some are
too.
more holidays, some of them are my birthdays, and you're just like, really?
Yeah.
Really? But they planned it that way. They want to
Yep.
significantly have impact and feel like they still have some kind of power in your life. So it's a different kind of grief, because it's like you trusted and loved this person, and then they betray you in the worst way, and it breaks your heart, and whether they know they're doing it or not.
Yeah, narcissistic abuse is so hard, because it's like the minute you cut the cord, it just continues in different ways, different forms, different, comes up different.
Well, and whether it's grief or abuse or trauma, whatever it is that you feel is on you,
Yeah.
there is a way to release it. There
Yeah.
is a way to resolve it. It may take time, and sometimes it feels like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, but you can get there. And I hope, if anything you hear on this message today, whether it's how you're choosing to school your kids, or overcoming grief, or the challenges that you've had, or whatever you've been going through for the last few years that's really testing you and seeing what you have to overcome, know that there's the other side. Know that in the end, it's so worth it to be relieved and have that weight off, and to feel so much better. I personally am in a new space altogether, and my only regret now is not moving sooner, because the minute we got here, all of a sudden, all these emotions released. And then I was sleepy all the time. Well, come to find out that the last environment we were in was really draining me way more than I realized, and even my kids. And so we kind of have this new transition that we're in. We overcame so many things, and it took so much to get here, and we had so much adversity to get here, and even getting settled is taking so much. But now the fruits of all that work and that patience and everything is coming, and it's so joyful to be on the other side. And so for someone that's doing the work still, but on the other side of some of it, please come along, come heal, come be resilient, overcome whatever's holding you back, so you can really live into who you were meant to be. Then your kids can too, because they can't do that unless you set the example for them. If someone wants to work with you, Jocelyn, where can they find you? Any last thoughts as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I was just thinking, one of the things, like you were saying about resiliency, like you can move to getting to the other side. And what I think about is what I think when I agree, to me, it's grief right now that I'm moving through, but like the idea of moving through grief, learning the tools, right? Learning how to bounce back when you need to, because grief's going to come again. You're
Yeah.
going to be overcoming something in 3 more months. If you start to learn the tools and you put them into action, you don't have to think about it anymore. It begins to become part of who you are and how you handle things. So like for me, it's writing and art and yoga nidras and journeys in the records and shaman journeys, and it's human design. And that's kind of where my life lives. But as I practice those in this journey of overcoming, the next time they'll be present for me when I need them. So that I think is like a really important thing to say about that. But yeah, you can find me at jocelynbates.net. And you can also find my yoga nidras on Insight Timer for free if you're there. If you just want to try, like if you're having an overcoming moment, you want to try like a short yoga nidra to calm your nervous system. It's like effortless. And I talk about my grief on Substack. You can find me at Jocelyn Bates on Substack. I talk about my grief, particularly my grief and soul art journey together, and how I have been overcoming it in that way.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
I feel like with what you're saying, we can embrace life, but like going from, oh, why did that happen? Or why is this happening, to be expected. Here's the challenge. Here's the opportunity to grow, to be expected. And here's my tools that I'm going to use.
Yeah. Get curious. Yeah. And that's the other thing though. Getting curious is beautiful. Like that idea of like that curiosity has saved me. So has creativity. Because I'm always like, I think it's part of the tool of it, right? It's like, if I can go deep enough, then I'll understand it and I'll be able to wrap it in a different way for next time, or something along that, right? Like, how far can I heal myself? How far can I go, right? So that I'm whole next time.
And these are the things that no one can take away from you once you've developed.
Yeah.
This is your creativity, your imagination, your resilience. It's nobody else's.
Yeah.
It's yours, and you're the one developing it. So it's absolutely worth the work to find out who you fully are and what your full expression is, as Jocelyn has. Thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably and so openly with us today. Thank you for being here, audience. We really appreciate you, and I'm excited to be in the new space. We're still figuring setup and things a little bit, and I was just swimming with my kids, but hey, I'm showing up. I'm here. I'm going to figure this out and keep delivering for you. And next month, we will be talking about mastering your own unique resilience, which is kind of a nice end cap for where this conversation went, because it really is about your journey and uniquely how you can master your own unique resilience. And we'll have more on that next month. All right. I believe in you. Believe in yourself. God bless. And we'll see you next time.